are getting killed. This is ugly.
What's it looking like right now?
Right? It's 17-1.
God damn.
Yo, like, it was 11. It was
God damn.
11. It was 12-1 in the like. It's too early for the score to be looking like this against this particular team. Jesus.
Who y'all playing against?
Milwaukee.
Oh man, that's not good.
Yeah, they're like 28-29.
Yeah,
Like,
that's not good at all.
We lost last night too.
Shoot, I'm looking for it. I'm gonna have it on my phone, but the Knicks and the Pacers.
Oh yeah,
I'm gonna tapping with that.
Yo, I don't know, man. It's like heart and mind,
Without question, yeah. I'm all about chaos. So if I'm, what I mean. So like, I'm kind of rooting for the Pacers to win, just because.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a good thing. Like when you ain't got no like dog in the fight, everything good. It's smooth money.
Yeah, I'm having a great time though because the Sixers is on vacation. I don't gotta worry about shit. Like,
so I got a question for you before we lock in, man. Because this is a topic that covers a lot of ground, right? A lot of ground. So you and me, we're gonna dissect a lot. We're gonna ask a lot of questions. We're gonna have high intellectual conversation, especially about this topic. But the centerpiece
have it.
Oh yeah,
if that makes sense. Yeah. Mm.
The centerpiece of this topic deals with stereotypes, right?
Yes.
What stereotype in professional wrestling have you seen that genuinely made you angry? Like you were just like, yo, what the fuck are we doing here?
Like the forced ones, like the forced stereotypes.
Yeah, a forced stereotype. So like mine's is Saba Simba, Tony Atlas.
Got it.
91.
Absolutely.
I hate that gimmick with a passion. And you know what I mean? Like if you know the story about like Tony Atlas, he was living on the bench in New York.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? They offered him a contract, but with that contract came this gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, like, there's the footage of his debut match. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but over the years, I've developed a real hatred for Roddy Piper.
Okay.
Yeah. Because Roddy Piper has a tendency, and you know what I mean? People be like, oh, it was just the times. Forget that.
Yeah.
Where like Tony Atlas was like, or not Tony Atlas, Roddy Piper was a line stepper with both feet over the line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the WrestleMania 6.
Yeah, you ring some bells. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I remember with the Saba Simba joint, like it always felt like he always said or alluded to something racist when it came to that gimmick, which it was. Mm-hmm. But everything about that whole presentation just irked my soul.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, and I'm gonna follow up on that Piper thing because Piper is he's another interesting polarizing figure too. I think both out in ring, we got the legacy of Piper's Pit, but also just like behind Gorilla and like the type of guy he was in the locker room. But yeah, man, that's a good one. I think the one I'm gonna go with is one for me that I think coming up was kind of confusing, but going forward, I just want to shed some light on it. Mm-hmm. And this might be kind of unexpected, right? So let's go Mickie James.
Okay.
Sort of like the forced, abrasive lesbian stuff that they kind of was doing with Mickie. And it's not to say that Mickie didn't play into that effectively or whatever the case is. This is professional wrestling, and they're going to be some stereotypes displayed, right? Yeah. I'm an ECW kid, so but with the Mickie James stuff, and I think for those of us who are male, and I guess we're talking about it under a certain identity as being black males, right? We were displayed with really whatever, like word choice is a thing for me, but racy or like very aggressive sexual images, right? For sexual images that may or may not have resulted in the way that like we look at women. And I think that the media has been responsible for that in general. But when we look inside of pro wrestling, and especially like with the Mickie James Stratus stuff, as a kid, it's almost like, and fuck JR, right? But JR was kind of like a lot of the things that he would like say like on the mic in regards to like the women, I think was like him echoing maybe like a lot of like teenage boys, and you know what I mean, that was teenagers back in that day, the 99s, the 98s, the 2000s, 2001s, 03s, 04s, 05s. But yeah, as I'm getting older, so it wasn't even really one that I had an issue with as a kid, because I didn't necessarily have I just didn't, you know what I mean? You see these images and you just like, wow, I was, real quick, I was recently in a barbershop, and it shouldn't have been on, but a video came on the autoplay on YouTube. And it was a kid in the barbershop. In the video, it was like Lil Tyler and like some other rapper. I think it might have been Boss Man D-Lo. And the video was like, cheeks galore. You dig what I'm saying? With Boss Man and Lil Tyler being the only males visible in the whole video. And this kid in there about like 11, 12. He doesn't seem like he's a teenager yet, but he's just like, you know what I mean? And I'm just wondering like, what's going through his mind right now as these adults have this inadvertently, but they have this thing on, right? But you get faced with these images, you hit with these images. But I think that like some of the learnings and things that like I kind of got into, and not on purpose, right? But sometimes by accident, by talking to people and hearing about different things, feminist theory and all of these things. Kind of looking back on it, it's just like, yeah, the Mickey James like gay stuff was a little bit, and that may have been like appealing to some folks or whatever the case is. But yeah, again, man, one of those things by that audience of one. Right, that we the Mickey James stuff. I think that's gonna be my answer for that question.
And it's funny that you chose that one, because that was happening at the same time as the Muhammad Hassan gimmick starting.
Yeah.
So it tells you like everything you need to know about where WWE creative was at that time. Like it was like an alien identity that they were trying to fulfill, you know what I mean? Like they losing ratings, you know what I mean? They don't have to worry about nothing, because at the time, like TNA's only got a couple years old, but like from a creative standpoint, like it was a lot of questionable things happening. You know what I mean? Like have you ever heard the story? I forgot who it was, but it was a writer, and he had a pitch for you remember Heidenreich?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Have you heard the story about the gimmick he pitched Heidenreich in a creative meeting?
I haven't heard the story.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So he pitched that Heidenreich was a frozen Nazi.
Okay.
He was chronologically frozen.
Yeah.
And Paul Heyman, being that Paul Heyman is Jewish, paid money to thaw him out. And that was supposed to be the feud with the Undertaker. Now, the Heidenreich joke and Undertaker, like that happened, but like he was supposed to come down with like, I think it was like gonna be called like Von Heidenreich or something like that. He was gonna be doing the goose step. And the story is that like he pitched it in the meeting, and Vince looked at him, got up, and left. He left for the day.
Okay, yeah.
Which
very ballsy.
Which if you really think about it, like the type of person that Vince McMahon is, for him to be pitched that, and then for him to get up and walk out, I think the dude got fired like a couple weeks later. But
yeah,
like they were on a different creative strip at that time. This is weird.
Yeah, man. Weird. Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, the Nazi stuff, I think is it's and I think at that stage, it's very late stage for that stuff. You know what I mean? Especially like in 05, where it's like it's really no reason to kind of pull this card, right? I don't know, but that I mean, and granted, when you in that writer's room, man, you're trying to go for gusto, and I get Heidenreich's appearance, and but that's a lot, and if that was a lot for Vince. Yeah, I mean, like,
but look, we let's go ahead and hit this intro. The watch list is here.
Watch list.
Why does it matter to me? It's in my veins, baby. It's in my blood. You understand? Since kindergarten, since I was about this high, I've been watching wrestling.
Watch this. This ain't the pod for the gossip kid. BGW watch list. Black guys, civilized them 85s. Acknowledge the nerd that knows with the vibe. If you catch my live, Scotland goes live, no logos, bell to bell. 5 leaf for the leave it off the list of them holy grails. Speak raps with Chaz and D-Mac. 3 count on B-Mac, telling Pars to relax. Watch this, the watch list. Black out. Watch this, the watch list. Black out.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back on a rare Saturday night. You know, we don't normally do this, but we locked in. We got stuff to do for the week. But welcome to the watch list, the episode for the sickos. You know what I mean? Where we just come talk about a match moment. You know what I mean? We separate the typical stuff that we talk on the regular podcast. We just break down stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But this one is very. I've been wanting to talk about this with somebody for a long time, bro. A long time.
Mm-hmm.
Like this might be my biggest what if in pro wrestling.
Oh yes.
You know what I mean? Like my biggest and it's topical. Dark Side of the Ring just dropped the season finale on this individual. But before we get to that, ladies and gentlemen, coming in first, it is I, Scotland Underwood.
And coming in second in the 5th chair BGW pod, Lorenzo Pierce, AJ Styles P. All of those good things, baby. The watch list. Watch this. Muhammad Hassan. Walk with us.
Come on. The living legend himself, man. You out here doing great work. I just want to let you know. I'll let you know off air and on air.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you, man. I definitely do. Man. And I definitely want to, shine some light on our subject tonight. One, the man who played the character of Hassan, Muhammad Hassan, Mark Kapani, is currently a high school principal and is doing some excellent work in the community as well. And this is, an understanding man of community and culture. So just everyone shout him out.
Oh, without question. And like I said, we definitely going to tap into how he got to that position. And like I said, typically on the watch list, we've watched matches and everything like that. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a little bit more of a pivot, kind of like how we did the notorious 187 homicide. Whoop, whoop. Family, what's happening with you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, down with the clown.
And then Mike Billy and himself, A.O. Baker, what's happening? Peace. But tonight's subject for the watch list, arguably, I'd say top 5 most controversial gimmicks in WWE
ever.
Might be top 3, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Muhammad Hassan, right? Muhammad Hassan was a gimmick created in 2004 and went to June 2005. And like I said, there's so much ground we're going to cover, between Lorenzo and myself about what this gimmick was, what it became, you know what I mean? Like this is one of those type of gimmicks, like the push that he got out the gate, truthfully, until like from his start to the very end, like he was in the ring with like legends, right? Yeah. Legends. But what came with the gimmick is ultimately, like you said, what led to just some controversial decision making, some controversial ideologies, ideas. So in order to kind of paint the picture, we kind of got to peel the onion back. We got to peel the layers back. Mm-hmm. And there's 2 things we have to have a full understanding of, right? Yes, we have to understand wrestling stereotypes, and we have to understand the political climate of the United States of the time of this gimmick, right?
Yep.
So to you, what is a wrestling stereotype?
To me, a wrestling stereotype is a more heightened and maybe sometimes a much more abrasive version of a stereotype or person that you would actually see in our society. The wrestling version of a stereotype is much more pronounced. It's much more in your face. And it's just much more abrasive, right? It's almost like drawing a caricature at the amusement park. When you get a caricature drawn of like yourself, you're going to see that artist is going to enhance or give credence to certain physical features and like blow those up, right? So if you have like real big eyes, like that might be accentuated on paper a certain types of way. that's how it's done in pro wrestling. They take whatever we have in society, that cookie cutter version of a stereotype, and they basically put it on speed, the drug, right? Or they basically times that by 10. So that's kind of like the best explanation of it.
Yeah, and then like I said, like if you look, like this has always been, this isn't like the wrestling stereotype has been around as long as pro wrestling has been on television. You know what I mean? Especially after like the World War II and everything like that, where they would have American, Canadian wrestlers, you know, born wrestlers, and because they had a certain look to them, they would alter their gimmick to fit. Like they, you know what I mean? If you need a nasty heel, Fritz Von Erich, you know what I mean? Yes. Fritz Atkinson from Dallas, Texas, was now Fritz Von Erich from Nazi Germany. Yep. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of like Mr. Fuji, you know what I mean? Like Mr. Fuji was like an over the top, like the bowler hat suit, cane, you know what I mean? They always called him, what is devious, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Devious. And then there was the Middle Eastern stereotype, right? And you know what I mean, the two that typically come to mind, the original Sheik, the Iron Sheik, the Iron Sheik in particular, you know, his claim to get on the mic. What would it be? Yeah, he would be like Iran #1.
Yep.
America hot two, you know what I mean, does everything like that. And then we, you know what I mean, was teamed with Nikolai Volkov. So like we talking about like in the 80s, like that whole like Iran conflict, you know, Cold War, them putting them together, like they, you know what I mean, we drawing houses based off of hatred, you know what I mean? The Iron Sheik was so prevalent because him having the WWF title set up for the white All-American Hogan come in, swoop it up. Everything's all money, right?
It's a takeover.
Yeah. So like
American exceptionalism.
Yeah. So like I said, none of this is new, right? But for this gimmick, Muhammad Hassan, it was originally like a twist, right? He is the gimmick is as they described it, an Arab American who grew up in America, went to the same schools, you know what I mean? He was living the American life, right? But after 9/11, he's experiencing the prejudice of like, racism, and just the whole concept of like what a lot of Muslim Arab Americans experienced at that time. Especially, like I said, gimmick starts in 2004, just a few years ago was 9/11, right? But do you think that when it came to this gimmick in particular, like, because like Mark Capani's he's not Middle Eastern, right?
I said he's Italian. He's from Syracuse. Oh, corny.
Is you know what I mean? Like that, like I don't even think. I think he even said like he was like, I don't have any Middle Eastern even in me. You know what I mean? Like he comes from an Italian family, Syracuse. You know what I mean? Like he was in OVW. His original gimmick in OVW was like the Italian supermodel. You know what I mean? Because the kid had a great look. You know what I mean? Like physique was good. You know what I mean? He had the look of somebody that could probably be a star later on. Right. And they presented with this gimmick. And so in order to understand that, we have to talk about the political climate of what was going on in the times, right? So like for, how would you describe what America was like around 2004, 2005?
Absolutely, sir. Love talking about this stuff. 2004, 2005, I personally found myself in the 6th grade. About to go to 7th, like on the cusp, right? But you pretty much have it's that. I was thinking about Kofi a lot too, just watching Mark's confessionals on the Dark Side episode.
And by the way, to Cam, happy birthday to you, family. You know what I mean? I know I believe it was your birthday today.
Happy birthday, Cam.
Yeah, happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Yeah, mm-hmm. But we're locked into a second term, presidential term from none other than one George W. Bush, who was the sitting president at the time of September 11th. The infamous meme, sir, second plane has just hit the tower, all of those good things, right? I want to go back to the special that the WWE was a SmackDown episode, I believe, that they did on September 11th or for September 11th. I forget exactly when they aired it. Pardon me. And it might have been the third. I'm not sure, but I think that, you know, a lot of the feelings and emotions that a lot of folks have, especially if they're wrestling fans, watching that episode, and like when Muhammad Hassan like finally debuts, like they're projecting so much onto him. But this individual was just watching that same episode of SmackDown with them as an American, right? I just think that this is just really interesting stuff, really fascinating shit. That you can only find in the wrestling business, right? You're not really going to get this in film, or you're not, you know what I mean? So somewhat, but let's, you know, long story short, the country is very overly, and I would say ignorantly patriotic. And again, like I said, we find ourselves with another Bush term. Dick Cheney is still the vice president. So the geopolitical situation in the United States is that like we're now about to have like a chokehold on much of the global South. At the time, I believe we we was in Iraq already. You know what I'm saying? Osama is still out here, right? And we ended up kind of, you know, getting into some Osama stuff in pro wrestling, right? At a pay-per-view from none other than the Marine himself. But we're in a very interesting situation where folks are really proud, they're really loud. But a lot of that, and the thing is, we really didn't see it as like whiteness doing its thing. It was just kind of like, I think that's because we was kids. But I think a lot of us could say when we hear like chants of USA during certain segments and all of that, like people are talking about whiteness. They're not necessarily talking about like all of us as Americans, as a people, you know, trying to figure it out together from our different walks of life. So whiteness is at an all-time high, right? At this point in America. Yeah, I think that, you know, certain things is going on as far as like hip hop and, you know, certain commodified pieces of like culture and art. That's definitely going on. And I don't think people were really even, or the masses of people were really reaping the benefits from what they were given to society culturally. We got a rise in gas prices, a rise in, you know, corporate greed. It's a very interesting time in America, and probably one of the times in which like the classes was being separated like more than ever, and not just the classes, but the races, just all of us. You know what I mean? And we really didn't know it yet. The Obama shit kind of made it seem like everything was good again, but that was an experiment. But in 04, 05, whiteness is running wild, brother.
Yeah, without question. And like I said, we talking about 2004, like the whole vote or die campaign.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? That's running. that's running the whole airwave.
Vote or die.
Exactly this, like WWE being the first live public outing for a lot of I believe it was the first live event after 9/11. Like,
facts,
you know what I mean? Like growing up, we just like that was always something that was like they touted. Like yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like we stood up to right? And even then, like we talking about like I think end of 2003, like they're going to Baghdad to do the original tribute of the troops, and I think they did it for multiple years. But WWE then falls into this like it's like they really leaned into like the patriotism of WWE. Like this is like we're WWE. We support our troops XYZ, and so you're doing this. I think one thing that kind of gets lost in the sauce is so minuscule in like the grander scheme of things. But like I don't know if you remember La Resistance.
Oh my God.
Rene Dupree, Savon Grenier.
Right, absolutely. So that's my thing. This is one of my favorite locker rooms like ever. That's why I'm glad Maven was on this episode.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite like locker rooms like ever. Like La Resistance. Yeah, man. Let's go. Yeah, I'm with you.
Hey, nigga, the ruthless aggression area. Fire, man. You know, just fire.
Yeah. Heat.
But that gimmick, right? You know what I mean? Like, this was during the time where I think France was very opposed to America, you know what I mean, interfering in, you know, invading Iraq and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like they had to make, they would always do this thing where they would immediately make, I think they made them like extremely racist towards Americans, right? This is kind of like the Blood Resistance gimmick was a prelude to the Muhammad Hassan character.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh my gosh. Beautiful.
You know what I mean? Like they would do the vignettes where they were like in a newsroom and they were slandering America and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
A few months later, they have Rob Conway dressed in a military uniform and he becomes a French sympathizer.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like that doesn't get brought up, but like we tip in the lines already, because in my thought process, like that's it. You're saying that you were going for the troops, but then you're doing something that's disrespectful. That a troop, like being portrayed on TV as an American soldier, is now aligning with
on the other side.
On the other side, right?
The slaughter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, do you think that one of the questions I wanted to ask you when it comes to this topic and everything else is the maturity of WWE, especially during this time. Do you think, and even like we can even stretch it to today, just based on what we see with like certain people coming into WWE, do you think that WWE in pro wrestling in general has a maturity to pull off politically sensitive storylines and gimmicks?
There is a maturity that I think definitely lived and still lives, you know, in that main creative, in that main writer's room, right? But as we know in this day and time, like things always had to get past the desk. And I think that's where the immaturity and kind of like the sophomoric ways in which we look to entertain people are like those are going to be the avenues we go down based on like what this is pro wrestling. But again, it's like it's an exaggerated form. Like sometimes like the characters are exaggerated. So I think that like, you know, we're all adults here and we all got jobs as writers and shit, but we know that there's a certain ringmaster that will definitely pull all of the substance out of this and make it very surface and make it very reactionary to the point where and that's what pro wrestling is about, reactions and reactions equal dollars.
Right.
So I just don't I don't so I think and I really appreciate that question, but maturity isn't what makes capital. You know what I mean? And I think especially in something like the pro wrestling industry at this time.
Okay. No, I definitely and the reason why I asked that question is just based on like said the research going into this and like what the Muhammad Hassan character started with and what it ended with. Right. So you know what I mean? I have a video queued up. Nice. Let me see if I pull it up. You know what I mean? Will disappear from the screen for just a little bit. But like I said, the vignettes kick off, right? And you know what I mean? Like Mark Capani has spoken about, like he was presented with this from, I think, Jim Cornette and Arn Anderson were the ones that originally told him. And like I said, they start laying the foundation. You know, back then, if a gimmick was about to debut on television, they would test run it. So they would test run it in OVW. They would test run it in the house shows. And I remember, like, you know what I mean? I was only 14. Yeah, I was 14 when this storyline started. But I remember, like, the reports of the gimmick, like, drawing heat, right? And you know what I mean? Like, they bring in Sean Daivari.
Absolutely.
As his manager, who, you know, I will go on the record and say excelled in this role 100%. But Daivari was phenomenal in this entire run.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Flawless, right.
Yeah.
One thing I want to add, I'm sorry, boss, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say, you know, Daivari's role for this gimmick was, you know, Mark Capani couldn't speak Farsi, but Daivari could.
Yes.
Right. So, you know what I mean? Like, Muhammad Hassan would do the English and then to generate the heat, Davari would speak in Farsi, and then, like I said, that would take the gimmick to where it needed to go. But what were you about to say, bro?
That's the beauty of Davari, is that he was fluent in Farsi, right? And now, I know a lot of times people usually identify Arabic as like the main, language of Arab people, right? But Farsi is definitely, I think, like more Iranian specific, even going back before the kingdom of our, like, it's more Persian specific. So
yeah.
it has a certain, it has another type of the relationship that Americans developed with Arabic, right? And hearing like things like Allahu Akbar and things like that. Like it's Americans are basically kind of hearing the same shit, but like I feel like what Davari was laying out was very like poetic, and it was it was like some angry rap shit, like a Chuck D or like some shit like that. Like when you really get into like when you're really listening to what to how it sounds and like how he laying that shit down, and like you might notice like certain like phonetic patterns, right? Like certain things might rhyme or certain things might it seemed like he might be doubling down in something. Like he was just bodying that shit.
Oh yeah, he like you'll see it when we cue up this clip, and I only have one clip because I'm not trying to get this episode full. I'm not trying to get this shit full at all. But even like if you think about before this gimmick, like when it came to like Middle Eastern wrestlers, like especially during that time, you didn't really see too many. Like I could be 100% wrong, but the only two that like stick out of my head of that early 2000s is Davari and Sanjay Dutt.
That's it. Sanjay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even like Sean Davari, like when he was wrestling on Indies, his finisher was the magic carpet splash.
Yeah.
He literally had the magic carpet, like, what would be considered an Arabian style rug. And he would go off the top rope, he would drape the joint over him, and he would do the splash.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that, you know what I mean? Like I hate using the term, but it was a true sentiment. Like that was the times, right?
Yeah.
Hold on, I just want to see this. Crazy that this was the same year Chavo played Kerwin White. Yeah.
Huge on Raw. Yeah, definitely. That was like the Monday Night Raw stereotypical gimmick. Absolutely, Mark.
Yeah, which that's a whole
my gosh,
whole conversation.
I was talking about this not too long ago too. You know what I mean? Shout out, Julio Dre. Shout out to Dre had dropped a cut scene from backstage with Chavo, I think, was driving the golf cart.
Oh my god, bro!
Yeah, man.
It was wicked, man.
Yeah, wicked time.
But yeah, like I said, this is the original vignette for the Muhammad Hassan and Davari character. So play this real quick. Man. So off rip, first of all, we talking about heels. Look who's here. Nolo Green. Hey, brother.
Love you.
It's not Sunday, so I'm happy to see him there. I'm happy to see him. Yeah. But the Grayscale, like I said, not trying to get this shit pulled.
Yeah. That was key.
But off rip, bro, what do you make of this initial vignette? Like, you know what I mean? Because like for me, I look at it, and I'm looking at this as in hindsight of today. You know what I mean? Like he's declaring that he is Arab American. You know what I mean? He grew up in America, and after 9/11, you know what I mean? He's experienced the prejudices of, you know what I mean, what's going on in the world. And all he wants is an opportunity. He just wants an opportunity to get into the ring, do what he needs to do. You know what I mean? Like he politely passes it to Davari to speak to the people that speak that language. So, you know what I mean? Like this is the setting the tone of the gimmick. But what do you think of that initial vignette?
Mark did amazing character work. We could talk about what we want to do in terms of, folks not necessarily of certain backgrounds portraying, but in pro wrestling, it's all about the look, right? So just keeping it there. But he was doing excellent work here. He was doing excellent work from the inflection of his voice to how he came off in the vignette to then like how we end up meeting him, like, you know, in the arena with a microphone with the stick. But yeah, he was like in this character, like he's pleading, right? And something that you will notice is that, you know, he's not smug, he's very respectful, right? But at the end of his delivery before Davari, he holds out his hands and he says, "Praise Allah," right? Which at the, you know, people in America like couldn't see that like these were like that's a prayer. But people in America were associating terms like "praise Allah" and more specifically "Allahu Akbar" with terrorism. They couldn't separate those things, and that, my friends, is a grand feature of whiteness. Not to like divulge too much, or not to like talk about white people, but the phenomenon and the culture of whiteness, right? Like it's like certain things can't be separated, right? And wrestling companies make money off of that. And by the time you get Davari, they're hearing a language that they're also still associating with terrorism, associating with certain things. Like again, this is a faith, right? Like Islam is the Abrahamic religion, right? It's right there next to Christianity. It's one of its cousins, right? And so yeah, just real good stuff, man. Like just like the beginning of a really interesting run.
Shoot, you got to remember, like Mark Caponi had only been doing this for like 2 years up at this point,
right?
And that's one aspect, especially when we kind of get into like the in-ring promos and everything like that. Like for somebody that hasn't been doing it that long, like his presence was felt. Like he like was very comfortable on the mic, especially for as charged as the storyline was, right? It's like, and I felt like I saw it when I was doing my research today, like how comfortable he was by the end, right? Just because, like I said, like I felt like you have to have a certain confidence to pull this off, right? And like you said, like this initial one, calm, cool, collected, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like starting off, we're good. We're in, you know what I mean? Like he hasn't declared anything like that's throwing people off, you know what I mean? But talking about the climate, like when he said "Praise Allah," it was an instant boo. People just start booing.
Heat. All rip. Arena heat, all rip. You getting vignette heat. All right, cool.
All you know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? The next one was him in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? It was kind of the same thing. Like I grew up here, I went to school here, ate the same food as you, watched the same TV shows. And it's the same thing. He's just asking for the opportunity. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to get in the ring, do my brother's proud. And it was essentially the same as that one, right? But then we get to the next vignette, which was the grocery store. And it was his uncles, I believe that's how they portrayed it. And you know what I mean? One of the very first things I remember when I was a kid was hearing about like people, like I believe, I can't remember the gentleman's name. I was trying to find it before we started, but he was a Sikh. And I think it was like a week after 9/11, he was murdered. He owned a gas station and he was murdered. You know what I mean? And that happened frequently, you know what I mean? Like a lot of Middle Eastern people, like their stores were getting destroyed. They were getting attacked. So in this vignette, like they're inside the grocery store and they're, you know what I mean? It's all destroyed, right? It's all destroyed. And now the intensity of Muhammad Hassan starts to come out, right? Because now his family's being attacked, right? And you know, and like the line I remember, he was like, if I have to beat it out of you, like we will get our respect. If I have to start a revolt, like, and then you know, Davari matches the energy. But you know what I mean? Like, you know, being that you grew up in Philly and everything like that, like, was that something that you remember as a kid? Like, especially like if you were just out and about, like, do you remember seeing like Middle Eastern people being like treated differently as opposed to like maybe before, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there was always certain feelings and anger like put towards certain communities, especially in black communities in the city like Philadelphia. When I was growing up in the, mid to late 90s, there was definitely an intensity and a dislike for brothers and sisters of several Asian backgrounds who found ways to provide for themselves. And you would hear certain things said. I mean, I think that those of us that live in certain cities have seen these things. And this is like the hood too. Like this is like black people, you know what I mean, who and then I think politics start develop differently. And I mean, things have always been like echoed, but who really has business and commerce in our neighborhoods, and definitely always pointing various versions of anger and vitriol towards our Korean people, right? A lot of Cambodian folks down South Philly. And I think a lot of that came from things like, folks coming over from Vietnam here in Philly in the 60s all the way until the 80s. You dig what I'm saying? The Cambodian hunger situation. A lot of folks moved to West and South Philly. So yeah, but then you get a lot of this, right? Like you get some type of like weird, like, once we start saying like who's who in the neighborhood and being, Philadelphia is a big Muslim city also, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there still was like this difference sometime between like majority of the black community and business owners here in the city and in the neighborhoods.
And like for me, like I remember like before 9/11, like my mom, she owned like a series of like Dunkin' Donuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of her like people that she employed were Indians.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I remember as a kid, like post 9/11, like seeing the racist treatment. Like I've seen them people throw coffee at them. You know what I mean? Like, and you know what I mean? Like it put my mom in a violent situation too, because you know what I mean? Like people were calling, like I remember customers calling her out for employing them, you know what I mean? And then like even in Scotland, I remember hearing stories about, you know what I mean, like Middle Eastern people, you know what I mean? Scotland being a cultural hub that it is. And like I said, it is you know what I mean? Like there is a section of the city where in Edinburgh where it is very Muslim heavy. Yeah. And like I said, they would get attacked, you know what I mean? And so, like I said, this vignette being the way it was structured is like we've now established that he wants the opportunity, but at the same time, like essentially he's not going to take the disrespect, right? And he's calling out the hypocrisy of Americans at the time. You know what I mean? Like I think that's a very thing about the original gimmick. Yeah. He's not leaning into what people's perception of Middle Eastern people were of the time. Right. All he's doing is letting you know, like, hey, this is my culture, this is my ethnicity, this is my background. I just want to get in the ring wrestling. Yeah, I want to be the first Arab world heavyweight champion. You know what I mean? I think that was what they were trying to push at the time. Yeah. And then the next vignette is the airport. You know what I mean? And now we're ramping it up a little bit. You know what I mean? And all the while, I remember, I think it was after the first vignette. Yeah, it was after the first vignette. Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler were talking about him. And it's funny because like Lawler was like, oh yeah, we want to give him an opportunity. Yeah. Yeah. But
him and Jim Ross, bro, they used to kill me. Wicked, man. Kill me. And it's like the fact that they was letting him get certain things off, right? Like racist nation. I don't think I've ever heard a WWE superstar that's ever said that, like on the mic.
Nah, I can't remember. Yeah.
It's just, I don't know, man. It's just they had a lot of depth and substance with the original gimmick. You know what I mean? Like a lot of depth and substance. And yeah, I don't know. I just wonder. I always just wonder what if.
So let me ask you before we dive into the actual debut with Mick Foley, right? Say the gimmick was different, right? Like, let's say the gimmick, and I think when I was like doing my research, like Mustafa Ali, you know what I mean? And I bring up Mustafa Ali because like the gimmick he's doing in TNA, the President Ali thing, I think is a fire gimmick. And
yeah.
Can you hear me okay, bro?
We good.
We good? Okay.
Yeah, we good.
Ali gimmick. Can you imagine if he had done this joint back in 2004, like Muhammad Hassan being like kind of Bush, John Kerry, Muhammad Hassan, but like he's kind of like, I want to take back and shape America the way that is Muhammad Hassan.
Bro, if that would have been the lane they would have went down, like I think it creates a whole nother relationship too, right? Because it's like, here's a guy that's probably going to tear down Olympus from the inside. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's maybe somewhat of the reaction might be. Not for nothing, I did love the suits.
Suits were fire. Davari was out here looking like Steve. Davari was out here looking like Steve Francis, but it was still fire. It was still wavy.
No, real shit. That's it. It was that time too. But damn, yeah, that would have been crazy. That would have been very interesting. Like, yeah, like, and it's like imagining a world where it's like you got a white guy campaigning against like an Arab American, like fresh off of 9/11, and that would have been very gutsy as well. That would have been crazy.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah,
ahead of his time. Shout out to Mustafa, man.
Bro, he's killing it.
Yeah.
Hassan was a good character to promote as a positive Arab American character. But yeah, like I said, like I've always looked at the Muhammad Hassan character that there was a great babyface run had it kept going, and it kept it like it was. If it didn't go the way it was going, like in my view, like I love the concept of later on him really leaning into his like the patriotism he has for America, right? And I think that's a concept. Like when people say like this gimmick had a shelf life, it only has a shelf life if you don't give the garden water to grow. Yeah. They could have easily have put this into something else, but
but that's where maturity come in that too, though. And it's not to say that maturity can't make capital or a certain amount that's like, feasible for this pro wrestler and the money that he's bringing in or whatever the case is there. But I think there could have been a lot of creativity down the line, especially in the time like right now. And I mean, granted, I don't know, right? Because and I think I'm gonna wait a few minutes to say what I was about to say. But yeah, I just think that man, it could have been a number of ways they could have developed this throughout the years.
But we hop into the actual debut, which I just found out today was in Huntsville, Alabama, which I thought was quite hilarious. That this is where the debut of the gimmick took place.
Yeah.
Right. But Mick Foley comes out. Mick Foley is, at this time, like we hadn't seen Mick in a while. And what was he? He was promoting that he was gonna be at tribute of the troops, I believe.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting choice that it was Mick Foley, the one to kick this off, because to me, I don't know, but to you, like when you think of kicking off a very political American, you know what I mean, Middle Eastern style, do you look at Mick Foley as like, yeah, Mick Foley, that's an All American right there?
No. However, not necessarily, right? Like
right.
like Long Island or where's
Long Island? Yep.
Okay, just like Max Jake. But anyway, it will gives a whole nother connotation to the place too, and that's the interesting thing about billing folks from certain locations in New York. But anyway, Mick Foley is not the go-to like American, like not really, right? But when you put someone like him, right, on the stick and on the screen, such as Muhammad Hassan at the time, and granted, it's funny, they're both geographically from like the same area, almost.
Yeah.
Right. It's this shit is so fucking. That's what I'm saying. It's so fascinating, right? Like these two men are from like Muhammad Hassan is from New York State. You know what I mean? And he experienced 9/11 too, a certain type of way, and just like y'all. But but again, pro wrestling, man. But he's not. But when you put him up against Mick, and Mick has on some dog tags, and Mick is saying, this isn't about a political party affiliation. Like this is just about an American. The stage is set. Stage is set right here for this guy to come out. We already know that Mick has a certain reputation with the crowd. But for this quick second, we can put that American hat on Mick, and you know what I mean? Like, because the stage was set from there.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, and like, you know what I mean, Muhammad Hassan and Davari, they come out, and I'm looking at like the crowd. Like I'm very intrigued by like the crowd's reaction to him.
Right.
The first thing I see is a go back to Iraq poster. That's the first thing the first thing I see. He's in the front row.
Go back to Iraq.
And like he's alluding to a lot of the same stuff he's saying in the vignette, but like doing a vignette and then doing an in-person promo is two different things.
Absolutely.
Right? And then on top of that, it's your debut on television.
Yeah.
And on top of that, your promo opponent is Mick Foley.
Right.
Like I don't think I've ever seen a talent be put in a predicament the way Mark Capani was.
No.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not going against, like, I mean, he wrestled the jobbers of the time, but like, we talking about promo for promo, and he's kicking it off with Mick Foley. And so, like, what did you think of the initial, like, his initial thought, like, what he's saying in the promo?
I thought, because we watched the anger build, right? We definitely watched the anger build from the dark vignette to being in suburbia. And that's the thing, the suburbia and this perfect backdrops for this character that we're trying to develop right now. Perfect backdrops. Like, you know what I mean? Like for the times, Mark's facial expressions, you know what I mean? Like in the anger that he was developing throughout each one. By the time we get to Huntsville and we got like Mick shouting out troops and we got troops in the crowd.
Yeah.
And he's calling troops gutless cowards.
I'm laughing because like him, like, you know what I mean? Like him doing that in 2004 while troops, like that's insane, man.
And so again, man, like the draw of heat that they were trying to initiate here, I just think it was a success. But I'm like, this is he's more upset. He's more angry. And as a kid, I'm thinking like, well, damn, like they probably gonna start thinking he is a terrorist because he basically said fuck the troops. And so when you and with praise Allah, with all that, and with Davari, like they're going to think that anyway. But it was, again, man, like you should have just kept your foot on the gas of like pulling more substance out of this character, no matter where. And they're going to think what they're going to think, but just have him do his job. Write the copy. You dig what I'm saying? Like have him spit that shit. But again, man, I think that the initial debut on the stick with Mick was a definite success because we don't have nothing else if we don't have this.
Without question, like you know what I mean? And like I think that's the beauty of like that it being Mick Foley, right? Just because, like I said, like if you can't have the promo with Mick, then the likelihood you're gonna do it with anybody else is gonna be real different.
Exactly.
And then, like I said, we talking about an era where like getting heat probably wasn't on everybody's radar, right? And but like when I say get heat, I mean like where you genuinely have the fans want to pay money to see you get the work, right? I remember the Un-Americans, right? There's Lance Storm, Test, Christian, Regal, and I think like I think it was a Bruce Pritchard podcast. They were like the gimmick didn't go anywhere because they were scared to get heat, right? And we talking about like between Lance Storm, Christian, Regal, you know what I mean? Like we talking about like some seasoned veterans here. Like we're not talking about like Mark Capani here, but like from the surface level, it looks like Mark's leaning into it. He's like, all right, we here, let's do it.
For sure.
Is there anything from the initial, like I said, from the initial promo, like especially looking back on it now, like is there any key things that you did take away from it?
I think the key thing that I took away from it was that he is again he's not this tweener, because it seems like in the very first vignette, like it's like, what is he, right? Like he's presenting himself in a certain way, he's coming off a certain way, but like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Like he's, but by the time, we get to that conversation with Mick, I'm like, yeah, I don't think this guy's going to be perceived as a good guy at all.
Right.
I mean, people are going to keep going with their biases. And I just started to try to have conversations with my dad and mom around this time. I'm like, it's a Muslim wrestler now, and I definitely thought he was Arab. I didn't know he was Italian.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just was a funny time, man. But just from that first promo, I'm like, yeah, this is we definitely gonna be seeing him, but he gonna be a pain in the ass going forward.
Shoot, the next again week, he interrupts Stacy Keibler. You know what I mean? Which, to like you said, going back to what you were talking about with Mickie James and like the 18 to 34 demographic and the way they were viewing women in wrestling at the time, like Stacy was about to, I think she was about to do some type of dance, right?
Okay.
By the way, because we haven't brought it up yet, Muhammad Hassan's theme song, banger.
Yeah, it was that work. It definitely was that work.
Banger.
Yeah. It had that flow to it. You know what I mean? Like it was perfect for him.
Yeah.
The intro, you know what I mean?
Oh, and like I said, like we're in that area now, like where you have a hard time like figuring out who's coming out the entrance based on the music. You heard this, you knew exactly who was coming out. It was an instant heat seeker immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that you're interrupting Stacy Keibler, right? But there's two things I want to point out, right? Interrupting a blonde white woman at that time is a guarantee. Like you're the most hated person in that arena.
Absolutely.
Right.
Especially Stacy at that time. Like.
Right.
Yeah.
And they go into that point. Jerry Lawler's on commentating, and he's talking like literally sexualizing Stacy Keibler. And that's the reason why he's mad at Muhammad Hassan.
Yeah.
He's not mad at Muhammad Hassan because of what Muhammad Hassan has said to the troops or anything like that. Like he never said anything about Hassan when he was doing the promo with Mick. I think they were just like he's disrespecting Mick Foley.
Yeah.
But like interrupting Stacy Keibler, that was the last straw.
Yeah. It's like not JR is he's a fool.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
But like I said, like that interruption of Stacy Keibler is the kickoff to the match at New Year's Revolution with JR, or I think it was Muhammad Hassan against Jerry Lawler with Daivari and Jim Ross in the commentary. So there's no commentary during the match.
Right.
One thing I genuinely love, and I'm, you know what I mean, and prayers up to JR, you know what I mean, I know he's going through a lot right now, but Jim Ross getting his ass kicked was like destination television for me.
Bro, every time Jim Ross got hands put on him, it was almost like, yo, like are we sure? Oh Oh my God, good old man. Shout out to good old. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I gotta see this. Like they about to ring JR through it. Like damn.
You think that was a good move too for like that being like his first match?
I mean, it was a choice, and I think it was something that they had to go with, especially trying to put him on the pay-per-view. The conversations that they had, I think, before that. The debate. And again, they're trying to draw as much like heat, like juice heat as possible out, because we love good old JR. You know what I mean? You hear them snares, you know what I mean, from Oklahoma. And you hear that Boomer Sooner theme song, man. Like that's good old American JR. You know what I mean? So having Muhammad go through that with him again, they're drawing as much as they can out of this shit, man. It was a choice. It wasn't necessarily like for wrestling. It was for entertainment.
Yeah.
And yeah, just again, just I mean, like touche for the time and where it landed on the show, but it definitely was a choice. But I think it was like maybe like the one that they had that could like again emit just the most amount of what they needed out of the Hassan stuff on this show.
Bro, and once again, going back to like Davari's greatness, like Muhammad Hassan is like, this is still the second week. Muhammad Hassan is still in the ring doing the promo.
Yeah.
But then Davari has made his way up to where King and JR were, like, you know what I mean? For like those that don't know, on Raw, the announce table used to be at the ramp, like at the very top of the stage.
I used to like that.
Oh, it was fun. Yeah, there was that old Nitro feel. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. But Davari is at the desk and he's calling out. He's like, yo, y'all are the soundtrack to this. Y'all are the one that put the information or putting the information out. He called them good old boys, right? And then, like I said, they, Hassan and Davari, they give them that work. They have the debate. They had the match, which, funny enough, was in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, it was. That New Year's resolution. Yep, sure was.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, now we've hit the ground running. I think he beat up Sergeant Slaughter. You know what I mean? Like, we attacking patriotism at its core.
Right, exactly.
And even then, like, you like doing the knowledge, like, Sergeant Slaughter, at one time, his gimmick was he was an Iraqi sympathizer.
Right. And they touched a little bit on that on the episode, too, and it flopped with Hogan. Because they said it was Corny said it was too early to pull that thing. You know what I mean? So,
like, even just in theory, man, like the idea of Sergeant Slaughter headlining a WrestleMania to me is just nasty.
Wild.
Nasty. These niggas wanted to sell out the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum.
Bro, that's where they had the Olympics at. Are y'all serious?
Yeah, with Sergeant Slaughter on top.
Right. Come on, man.
Hilarious, man.
That shit hold like six. How much did that shit? That shit hold like 60, don't it? Depending on the event.
Sure, I think at the time they were trying to push like 70 plus.
Lord have mercy. Yeah, man. Yeah. That's a wild ball.
Nasty work, man. Yeah, nasty work.
Mm-hmm.
But now we get to, like I said, we're now establishing the character. Like, it's been a month. The next big spot for him is the Royal Rumble spot, right? I used to be a kid. Like, I don't know about you. I used to get mad when certain niggas weren't in the Rumble.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, did you know that Scott Hall has never been in a Royal Rumble?
No, he hasn't. Yep.
It's wild to me.
Yeah, like even like go back in memory. No, you can't remember. He's never. Yeah, you can't even think of you. You can't point to the moment. You can't visualize it because it doesn't exist.
I hate that.
Yeah, it is kind of a weird. Yeah, like
like, and then like I actually remember when Hassan he won a qualifier match. I was hyped. I was like, at that time I was a fan. I really liked the work he was doing.
Yeah, and he was good in ring. He was great.
He was solid. He was a solid hand.
Good size.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, it may be in a different lifetime, in a different world. Like, Mark Capani on a different gimmick is like considered right now like a legend. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know. You know what I mean? But like, he had the skill set, right? Marks from Mike's, JT, what's up, bro?
What's going on, JT?
Love,
what's up, boy?
Love. But for those that don't know, 2005 Royal Rumble. The theme of that particular show was Raw versus SmackDown, And at the time, I think in the ring from the Raw side was Jericho, Edge, Shelton Benjamin. There was a couple people on Benoit.
Yeah.
And then SmackDown had Guerrero, Mysterio, Luther Reigns, Booker T. You know what I mean? I'm having and you know what I mean? Like they're doing the spot, but then Muhammad Hassan comes out and the ring stops. Everybody just stops. And Hassan's coming out. He's got the cocky, you know what I mean? He's walking with confidence.
Yeah.
But like I said, like he goes into the ring and they all surround him, which I don't know if the intended purpose was to like I looked at it like all of these niggas is the heels. Yes, it's the Royal Rumble, but like they not attacking him to get him out the ring so they can win the Rumble.
No,
they're attacking him because like they're proving his point already.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're like the fuck. I can't win for losing.
Just in a small humor. You know who the first person to hit him in the Rumble was?
Who?
Jericho.
It was Jericho, who's not even a fucking American.
I mean, but what'd you think of the spot though?
It was predictable. It was very predictable because you get a who's who of the locker room. Not only like a who's, but like the guys. You dig what I'm saying? And it's like, all right, like that's like okay, like that's cool. Y'all just gonna jump him and you know what I mean, get y'all shit off. And not for nothing, but I think this Rumble might have took place after his particular hearing, his wrestler court hearing that took place backstage from the episode.
That was after.
It was after. Okay.
It was after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay. I stand corrected. However, I think that in this, it was just very predictable. We know that he necessarily wasn't like a threat. You know what I mean? So like, you know, we some of us probably wanted to see him right in a certain spot in the final four, whatever the case is. But yeah, man, I just thought it was very predictable. A little cheap, but entertaining, but predictable.
And it's funny you bring up the wrestling court, right? Because you know that's like the emphasis on that is just out of this world about what that was and what it entitled and the things that certain people ultimately went through, right?
Yeah.
So if you remember, in that same Rumble was the Daniel Puder joint.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Daniel Puder had just won Tough Enough.
Yes, he did.
We're coming off him nearly choking out Kurt Angle or breaking his arm on TV, right? And they put him in the Rumble, and the people that they put him in the ring are Guerrero, Benoit, Hardcore Holly.
Mm-hmm.
And they just chop the shit out of him. You know what I mean? Like they essentially bully him. They jump him in the ring.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where it ties into, like I said, the wrestler court, because that particular episode he's talking about was in February 2005 when they were in Japan.
Got it. Yep, it was overseas. Got it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to for the people that haven't seen it, you want to explain what he was in wrestler court for?
So, to my understanding, Eddie Guerrero's father did invent the camel clutch.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so again, we just had an interesting time where like Eddie is like he's the guy at this time. That is like his submission, but at the same time, it makes sense that Muhammad Hassan uses the camel clutch as well, right? Just based on the Sheik, based on the Iron Sheik, you know what I mean? Excuse me, and just like his relationship with that, and like the fans' reaction to someone like Muhammad Hassan putting that clutch on, you know, whoever, right? Whomever. Him and Eddie had a conversation, I believe. And Eddie, you know, they had a conversation about it, and Eddie said, like, of course, like I'm going to use it like that. Like my dad invented it, right? And I think like on that house show, or no, it wasn't a house show. It was definitely a program that I think they televised.
Yes.
It was used. It was used. But they basically did the whole wrestling court thing. If anybody can remember, I think the best like on camera iteration of this, and I think that we probably seen in the last few years, is the tribal court that they did in ring with the Bloodline, South Philadelphia Knights. Shameless plug. Also, I think that Mark didn't want to step on any toes. I think that he really was just trying to do his job. But I think all of the boys, all the guys in the back, they came together. I believe it is the Undertaker who like runs Wrestling Court.
Yeah.
He sits at the head of that particular table. And yeah, I think that they deemed him guilty, and his penance, basically his punishment, was a night out on the town, right? Like you got to buy the boys all their drinks, and he's buying like this expensive sake. He says like very expensive, like Japanese liquor, and like certain guys when they get they shot, they just pouring it on the floor, right? Like this hazing that he has to go through.
It's ridiculous
of using this finishing move, right?
It's embarrassing because like these are grown men in another country, mind you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pouring like it's like this wrestler elitist.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like it's funny because like I said, like you're getting like I think he said in the interview, like these are like high quality liquor.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like in Tokyo. You know what I mean? If you like I said, if you know about alcohol content in Japan, like we talk about some of like the most
strongest in the world.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And like they're wasting it.
Right.
And like I said, like if I'm not mistaken, that Wrestler Court, like it seemed like it was very SmackDown heavy. Like it was Taker, JBL, you know what I mean? But then like that whole concept of like people being jealous of your push, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of the time frame. I'm thinking of like veterans in the locker room who's jealous. And keep in mind, we're now at a point like Muhammad Hassan is on television every week.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting a prominent role, right?
Yep.
Like who the fuck's like I'm not trying to see Stevie Richards in the main event. Like
yeah, right. Like nah.
Like,
it's Stevie, my man. Fuck out of here.
Yeah, like what are we doing here, man?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But like I didn't even like I was shocked to find out that the person who told him to go talk to Eddie was Kurt Angle. I didn't know that.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? Like there's a difference between like this is why I like the locker rooms of today as opposed to back then.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like instead of building up a young kid like, hey, this is what you should expect, XYZ, like you're setting him up to be hated in the locker room.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and like I said, I'm not a professional wrestler. I've heard mixed bags about how wrestlers feel about like the locker room etiquette. I'm never going to be in a locker room. I'm you know what I mean? Like I dap up everybody when I see them.
Yeah.
So like, yeah. But I don't know, man. Like, do you feel like just based off, forget the gimmick, like the backstage heat?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you think, like, ignoring the gimmick, do you think the backstage heat would have eventually just killed his whole push? Like, I say that because, like, we're talking about a time where I think there was a lot of reports of the younger guys like coming up from OVW who would be then put on the main roster. But like I said, particularly SmackDown, and they would be bullied so hard. Like I think the biggest story that comes to mind is Palmer Cannon. He was doing the joint with Teddy Long, and they were ribbing him so hard on one of the European tours. He just quit. Like he just packed his bag. He's like, I can't do this.
Right.
But do you see that like if that could have been Mark Capani's fate had he just stayed, like the locker room would have drove him out?
I you know what? I don't think it would have been that bad for Mark. I think that Mark had a lot of smoke coming out of OVW. Mark was also of a certain understanding of the business and of a certain size. And so I think that certain things that befall other people, and I mean, granted, he is getting the push, and I think that maybe a little bit at the beginning there was some protections, maybe coming from, I don't know, maybe a producer or agent or two, because of, I think, the stated importance that the so-called audience of one, the plans that he had and the particular moon that he wanted to push him to. I think there were certain, if like things wouldn't have went too far, is basically what I'm trying to say. I think there would have been a limit to certain things, even when you hear the retelling of the story and how things ended up being patched up with him and Eddie and the conversation that him and Eddie had. It's like, all right, well, like if Eddie now approves, then I think this might have created some particular type of positive domino effect or positive ripple effect. Not that, it just would have resulted in, all right, well, shit, if Eddie saying he Gucci, then like shit, like and it might have been some more bullshit coming from some other, from some of the other boys, but I think that some of that shit would have wore out, and it kind of would have been like culturally, like Corey in the locker room to still like be hammering on Hassan when he getting that shit done. He getting a certain reaction and he moving a certain way in ring. Like you can't hate on that kid for this long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So and like, it's a little different.
And like I said, like it was clear from the get go, like the push is going somewhere. Like we going to like we're not in the mid card, we're not in the Intercontinental title. Like we bypassing all that, going to WWE Championship, World Heavyweight Championship. Like I said, you can't do it in this moment because we're in Mania season, but like after Mania, like we now have a major player that we can work with, right?
Yeah.
But then, like I said, before we get to Mania, we start to see the shift in the gimmick, right? I completely had forgotten at this time that he was doing the throat slash to people. Which he explains in the Dark Side of the Ring, like people have been doing the throat slash, like that's Taker.
Right.
People have been doing throat slash for years.
Yeah.
But for a Arab American character doing the throat slash, and people already have a perception of him, I was like, God damn, that like who made that call? Like who is you right?
Yeah, it's a whole nother ball game. You know what I mean? Because of certain VHS tapes and things that's being sent all over the geopolitical climate at the time. And yeah, man, it was heavy. That was some heavy stuff for Americans, man. Like it was, yeah.
Do you think that they were trying to like lean into that part because the heat was like, I mean, and like I said, like the heat was already there just off of the strength of what the gimmick was originally.
Right.
Do you think this is where like they dipped their hand into the bucket way too much?
Way too much.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they really thought they had the right call here by by just like digging into that bucket.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense that someone like him being called these things, like, a lot of times in our society, people that are under certain types of oppression, when you put certain labels on them, it's like a thing that you're kind of speaking into existence. And then things that end up happening in which the term that you wanted to label them in your society, you can then put that term on them and it then register as correct.
Right.
And that's what they do here in America under whiteness in the English language to people who don't really speak this like historically, or I mean, we do it. We speak English. We speak a certain version of English as Black Americans, but we don't. The Kings and all those other things are a bit different, right? And Old English and all of those things, which well a lot about. But yes, we do have our own dialect within English. But what I will say is that you just had a situation where relatability factors and all of those things are totally out of the window at this point. And yeah, man, I don't know. I just really feel like we were just at a point where they wanted him to be a terrorist. They didn't want any type of like even like how you were saying, right? Like because and I don't know what the sympathy was that you probably ended up having for someone like Taker, right? Once we discuss another segment. But I started to develop some of that sympathy and empathy for someone like Taker when I saw that, because of my relationship to like the tapes and other things. So, and we're gonna get into that. But again, I really think they really bit off way more than they could chew, and they really thought they had it correct here. But this is where that immaturity come into play.
And you see, like I've always been a like being a student of the game and learning the history. Like you over years, you learn like when a story is being exaggerated. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just everyday life. Like you don't even need pro wrestling for that. Like you could tell when somebody's talking to you a story being exaggerated. So like
Mhm.
in pro wrestling, everything's an exaggeration to an extent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely. Mhm.
oh, like maybe in the 70s, oh, you know what I mean? We'd be walking down and I got stabbed 25 times, but you know what I mean? I still did the match. Right. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, which I have no doubt those things happen. It's just like I
Right.
said, that 25 stabbing was probably like 2.
Right. And it felt like it.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Mhm.
but then like Muhammad Hassan, Mark Kapani talking about like them telling them to do the gimmick outside of the ring. Because like for whatever reason, still in 2005, we're trying to keep kayfabe, right? So you're asking an Italian American to go and be an Arab American, right? And I feel like in that part of the interview, like you could tell that it was in that moment at the time that his eyes got a little bit more open, because he talks about like seeing the way Davari was being treated.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And Mark Kapani, from what I've seen from all the interviews, like very intelligent person, you know what I mean? But like you can also tell like he sympathized a lot with what was going on, right? Because if you're asking somebody to go into the world to be a character, and their character on television has a gripe with the United States of America because of his nationality, because of his religion, people, unfortunately, especially when it comes to like acting as a character, real life people don't disassociate.
Yeah.
So they don't see Mark Kapani, they see Muhammad Hassan, they see Khosrow Davari.
Yeah.
They don't see Mark Kapani and Sean Davari. They see them as the characters.
Right.
So like do you think he experienced like you know what I mean, like he's young, and I think he said like it was around this time he's like speaking up like, I don't know if we should be going this route, and they pretty much, he directly said with Stephanie McMahon, told them like, do you not understand the opportunity you're getting here?
Right.
Oh, I apologize.
Right. I'm not trying to fuck up my opportunity.
Yeah, but like at the same time,
but y'all
like,
know everything.
A nigga not trying to get jumped outside either.
Right.
Or killed. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, like y'all know everything though. Go ahead, y'all. All right, go ahead. Yep.
Do you think he was starting to like it was an eye-opening moment being the gimmick outside the ring?
Yeah, because he had to get on them planes with that kufiya on. You know what I mean? And that's not a good look for a lot of Americans, especially in 2004. Right? Like, what the hell is that? Who the hell is this guy? You know what I mean? Like, so, like, even when he's in the ring, well, Austin tells him, like, yo, like, your beard fit. You got a gimmick beard. Fuck is that towel on your head? Like, not for nothing. And, you know, come on. Like, Austin is. But, again, that was for the audience. That was for everybody else. Like, it's a term called towel head. That's a slur. You know what I'm saying? Like, or he might have said rag. I don't know what Austin said.
No, he said towel. He said towel. Yeah. He said towel.
Peace to all my brothers and sisters and families out there. You dig what I'm saying? Like, you know, I got a kufiya right here. Yeah, but it's just like, again, man, it's like we were trying to do these things and like just really like squeeze every like penny out of this shit. But they drove it home way too fast, bro. They went home way too early. And they couldn't, and again, I'm sure they necessarily didn't think that they probably was going to get any letters but when you playing with like world events.
Yeah. So like, you know, he does the Mania joint with Hogan, right? Who I'm pretty sure had
oh my God.
Yeah, like
yeah. Again, sharing the ring with just like the who's who of this industry.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like we talking about like you've been in the ring with Foley, you've been in the ring with Jericho, you've been in the ring with Hogan, you about to be in the ring with Shawn, you about to be in the ring with Taker. You know what I mean? Like you're in the ring with Cena, Batista. Like you're not in a position where like, yeah, he's next up. Like you're in the mix, you're in the conversation. Like going back to what you were saying about Capital, like the only time you get that much screen time is if they have a solid investment in you, right? And like I said, like he's holding his own. Like he's not like he's like this push not warranted. And I think like around March and April, you really see the confidence in him start to come out.
Yeah.
Right. It's with him and Davari.
Like, who
what do you think about what do you think about the Mania joint?
I thought it was well done. I will say that again, you know, Hogan, man, and it's interesting too. You know, the man that sings "I'm a Real American" recently died.
He just passed away. Yeah, I
heard that. Yeah. But you know, and I guess for what it's worth, rest in peace to him. But again, the pop, and mind you, this is like for me, like this is like prime Mania era, right? Like we coming off of 17, 18, and 19. You dig what I'm saying? We went to MSG for 20, right? Had a great time there. That night felt like 2 nights. Like watching that pay-per-view felt like anyway. Then you get 21 in LA. Like you only could imagine like shit. Like what if shit was still cooking? Like what would have 22 had been like in Chicago? Right? Because he's built from Detroit, a hub for many Arab Americans in this country. You dig what I'm saying? Just like our old head Sheik, who we saw a few episodes ago on this very same season of Dark Side of the Ring, right? And you know, rest in peace, Sabu always and forever. But he's built from Detroit. You dig what I'm saying? Like that could have been scattered in Chicago that next year against a potential Cena, maybe, or I don't know. But long story
like not skipping ahead, right? Not skipping ahead too far, but like
they had rapped a little bit too.
Can you imagine if he had won the world title?
Okay, big goal.
And his opponent at Mania was Kurt Angle.
Oh yeah, that's a one too.
That's a hitter right there.
Yeah. I mean, the Great American Bash idea was kind of hard too, like defeating Batista at Great American Bash. He from DC. You know what I'm saying? Like that, you know, that idea was crazy. But you know, getting back to 21, it was just, you know, Hogan is back in the WWE, like he's back in the red and yellow, right? Red for the blood and passion, yellow for friendship, you know, the old Hulkamania shit. And you know, he's pointing at Davari on his way to the ring. Yeah, I mean, he got the boas on, and they going the fuck off.
Hold up, real quick. Hold up.
Yeah.
That was so I never knew that was really why he wore red and yellow.
That's what they used. That so back in the day, that was something that I don't know if he said it out his own mouth or if it was something said like by Bobby on mic.
Okay,
but that was like the original thing about Hulkamania: red for the blood, for the passion, yellow for the friendship.
I always wondered why it was red and yellow, red and yellow. I was like, that's not fucking American.
It's not, but it's Hulkamania. Yeah. But the way it, you know, I don't know. The red and yellow, it was some funny shit, but I think Bobby might have came up with that first.
Okay,
it might have been a Bobby thing. Or it might have even been said by Vince on mic. I'm not sure. I got to look that up. But my pop used to say it, and I mean, but I think it was like one of them that kind of like coined it originally on mic on commentary. Yeah, man, and it's so funny. You know, we end up getting the boas, you know, because we used to get the boas in the NWO era.
Yeah,
but the red and yellow boas was just a lot. It was a lot. But again, man, Mania moment, right? You got at the time, you know, All-American Hulk Hogan, like he's the, you know, it's like one of the Wrestling America's final bosses. You dig what I'm saying? Like Money Mania moment. You dig what I'm saying? Like Money Mania moment for sure. And I'm sure definitely probably like one of the highlights of his wrestling career. But I thought it came off great. I thought it was at a great spot in the show. Yeah, man, Staples Center. That was money.
I don't know if y'all seen online lately, but yes, we the Halaband. Yeah. And I did see that video because just that whole shit was just wild.
Yeah,
but we almost there. We almost there with that.
Yeah. Game 6.
And then, like you said, for a kid from upstate New York, and you get to tangle with Hogan and Mania, like I'm sure that was a big deal for both of them.
Hell yeah, man.
Right, and then the next night they jump Shawn Michaels. So like it's like we going like you go from the Mania joint to having a match at Backlash with Shawn and Hogan.
Yeah,
and it's probably if I'm not mistaken, like the number 2 promoted match of the card, right? Maybe even higher promoted than Batista and Triple H that year.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely like top of the call sheet.
But like I said, now we're really kind of now like getting into that swing of like the Islamic part of the gimmick.
Mm-hmm.
And so like it's still, we're not at a point now where like we're seeing the end of the gimmick. But I do think this at this point, like they're now trying to navigate like what's next for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you assess, like before we jump to his move to SmackDown, like how would you assess like this Raw run? Because it's this Raw run, like he's wrestling Shelton, he's wrestling Jericho, he's tangling with Benoit. He had that match where Batista beat the hell out of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think his last match on Raw was his first pinfall loss his entire time on the main roster, and it was to John Cena.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But what how are we assessing the Raw run? And in your eyes, both from at the time and today, where would you put Muhammad Hassan like as his trajectory? Like, are we going up, or are we in the middle? Or are we going down?
Meaning like right before he jumps to SmackDown?
Or right before he jumped to SmackDown.
He had his fish grease right before. He's hotter than fish grease. Like this, people needed to see him in a certain spot. And that's why we've seen him so many weeks. We've seen him week in and week out with Daivari. And yeah, he was hot as shit at this moment, man. It wasn't, I didn't think it was any coming down from this. I thought we was gonna start to see like a certain once certain things started to become apparent, like, you know, it's like, damn, like he in there with HB. All right, cool. Like, it's like, well, damn, he basically like mixing it up with everybody. Like, is he on his way to a title? You know what I mean? So like I really didn't see him coming down yet.
And just so I had to kind of like piggyback off that, like if we're looking at this time frame and like bringing up Shawn Michaels is perfect. I felt like there was this agenda for putting the younger talent against a veteran to see how they do, right? So we're looking at that Raw roster at the time. We talking about Carlito, Chris Masters. A few years prior, they did it with Randy Orton, right? Which is a terrible comparison because, like, you know, 03 Randy was different. You know what I mean? Like he was on a different playing field. But like I said, Chris Masters had just debuted on the Raw roster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Carlito, like, you know what I mean? We know the story. Carlito's first win in WWE on the main roster was the United States title against Cena.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So like I felt like there was like that where can we fit everybody? And I feel like with Muhammad Hassan, like it just was like we're gonna get you to where we're putting you in the ring with the veterans, like he talked about, like being week in and week out, like you're getting an opportunity to be with the veterans on the road, getting the knowledge, like
right, yeah,
and like he, like I said, fundamentally sound already in the ring, and he's getting better. His promos is already on damn near I say for that generation, like he might have been top 5 in the company as a talker.
Absolutely. No doubt.
But then the SmackDown move happens, right? And can you explain to like the viewer, if they don't know, what the difference is between switching from like Spike TV to a UPN? Because there's two. There, like I said, like there's what you do on cable and like broadcast television, cable television,
like premium.
Yeah, like there's a difference between it, right? And so like going to UPN, like you are restricted a lot more, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're going to be under much more guidelines of regular broadcast television. You're going to be much just under the scrutiny of like the FCC, because the UPN is sort of like your like a we know about the big networks, right? Like the ABCs and the CBSs that have affiliate networks everywhere. However, UPN was there was a national regional network that had affiliates only in select cities. So they weren't all across America, but they were spread out enough across the country to where they had the representation like of the country. It was big enough. Their affiliationship was big enough, right? To where they were considered somewhat of a second tier major network.
Yeah.
We had black sitcoms and UPN being primarily popping in the black and like lower class communities, correct? or at least more prominent, right? And watched more in certain cities. But now when you jump into when you go from like a Spike TV to a UPN, like, Spike TV is much more, it's premium broadcasting, right? So it costs more to like advertise on something like a Spike TV. Different, and like, it's in Spike TV is premium television, which means like it's going to be, most channels are for like specific audiences, like a travel channel or like a Discovery, right? Spike TV was for a specific audience. I don't think we have to highlight what audience that is right here, right now. But again, the things that they were able to get off on the Spike TV, they had much less like public responsibilities, in that respect.
It's important to note too, like, especially as we kind of paint the picture of what as we come to the end of the gimmick, that the way it used to be was you would have Monday Night Raw, and then that Tuesday would be the taping of SmackDown. And then SmackDown would get broadcast on Thursday, right? Later Friday.
Oh yeah, man.
Classic. You know what I mean? Like,
sometimes you used to have to go to SmackDown on Tuesday when it was in. So it was just like, it was.
I'll never forget, bro. Norfolk, Virginia, 2002, got taken to SmackDown, and like my dad's taking me, and I'm like, wait, why are we going now? I'm like, SmackDown's on Thursday.
Like, what the fuck? Yeah,
I was like, we're not gonna be able to make it out both days. Like,
right, yeah, man, yeah. Oh man, to be young again, man, and learn how the business is working is amazing.
It's unbelievable, man. But like I said, like, you know what I mean? I'm very curious, and I don't think it's ever been like stated like who made that decision to put him on SmackDown. Knowing full and well, like, the same things you do on Raw, you're not going to be able to do on SmackDown.
Yeah.
And so you have this, and this was during they were doing like a series of draft picks.
Yes.
This is when Cena goes to Raw, Batista goes to SmackDown. You know what I mean? Like, it was prime television at this time, summer 2005.
Right.
And like I said, for Muhammad Hassan to be in this core group, the big stars were the ones that were being shifted. Cena, Batista, Kurt, Benoit, I think Carlito. So, they saw the promise in Carlito. Like, we're now in like full swing, but now, like I said, he's on the SmackDown roster. So now I think his introduction was they had just lost John Cena. Teddy Long was introducing a new championship. So, like, I think it had JBL, Booker T, Big Show, Benoit, and then Muhammad Hassan comes out. And they had, same thing, you know what I mean? Like, gets jumped because, racism. you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially with JBL in the ring.
Yeah, definitely. At that time. Oh, boy.
Quick question. Like, do you also associate wrestlers with aesthetics? So, like, to me, I'll be like, damn, this wrestler would be fired in this brand because of like the color scheme.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I know we probably got a lot of that stuff off, like, people play universe mode and all those types of things. Yeah, definitely. I'm with that for sure.
I felt like Muhammad Hassan just didn't like the SmackDown aesthetic on him.
It wasn't. He was a little out of place. I think your SmackDown. See, your SmackDown, or rather your Raw, is for those more polarizing characters, like that political, that, like, and I think your SmackDown is more, I think at this time would be like more for like, like your like your superheroes, or like your quote unquote comic book characters, right?
Okay.
Question. Where was Benoit in 2004?
He was originally on Raw.
And they switched him.
Like, just off the top of my head, he lost the title to Orton.
Yeah. Okay.
He had that little feud in the fall with Edge. Kind of floundered around.
Mm-hmm.
on Raw in
Mhm.
2005, and then he went to SmackDown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I think your SmackDown becomes more for people like him, and your Raw is for those more like polarizing characters. It's a Monday night. We just coming off of a weekend. People are thinking about world events, things in the world, the news, the primetime news that they probably just watched on a Monday night. Yeah, Muhammad was for the beginning of the week and not the end.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then, like
You
I
know
said,
what I
like
mean?
in like my perspective, like SmackDown was always destination television. Like
Uh-huh.
to me, the big feud that was happening at the time was Eddie and Ray. You know what I mean? We've now started kicking that feud up.
Right.
But then, like I said, we have this world title scene. Like I said, we're in a weird place, right? I'm in a weird place as a wrestling fan in general because like my focus isn't WWE at this time. Like my focus is TNA.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I just got introduced to Ring of Honor. So like I'm in a whole different state of mind. I'm still keeping tabs on everything just because it's just that force of habit. But like as a wrestling fan, I'm starting to change a little bit, right?
Right.
And like I said, like just thinking about like how TNA is, how Ring of Honor is, like you're not getting like these type of gimmicks. Like you're focusing on the grabs part, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then like I said, I'm just a fan of the Muhammad Hassan gimmick, and now he's about to feud with the Undertaker. And I feel, and like I said, please chime in. Like going against the Undertaker at that time is as big of a stamp of approval as you're gonna get as a pro wrestler in WWE at that time.
And that young.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because essentially the people were like asking for this, like they were asking for Muhammad to be mixing it up with these guys. Because eventually, when you expressing so much heat towards a guy like this, you want to see somebody beat his ass, and so you don't want to see like the guy in the bottom or even the middle of the card to try to do that because you don't trust him that much. Evening, Smiley, how you doing, love?
Peace, love. Good to see you. Hope you're doing good too.
You don't want to you don't want to necessarily give him to a guy at the bottom or the middle of the card because you don't trust him because your anger is at a level in which like you know what I mean, like I'm like let's call in the fucking reinforcements, like so we seeing the Hulk Hogan's, we seeing the, you know what I mean, so it's like yeah, now it's time for this. And I think Taker, you know, again, right, he's back in his element a little bit. We got some of that, you know, when he became much more synonymous with the American brand as a wrestling superstar. We got that, you know what I mean? We got it back later on, but you know, he'd be back in his element ever since he came back versus Kane at 20 at MSG. And yeah, the hair starting to grow back a little bit, you know what I mean? But he still kind of has that connotation still because that's in the foreground.
So can I tell you something?
Yes, sir.
I remember when Taker came back for 20, right?
Right.
And like, you know what I mean? Like one of the greatest entrances, like Paul Bearer coming back, the Druids and everything like that. And I remember when Taker popped up because I was watching it live.
Well,
I got mad. Yeah, 20. That's 20. I got mad as fuck. Because I was like, this nigga looks the exact same. I was like, nothing changed.
Right, like the hair barely grew.
Yeah, I was
barely,
like,
you know what I mean? Like
shit, I remember the SmackDown after 20, he popped up. This nigga had the bandana on. I was like, what's Dead Man about this? I was like, there's no
right.
Tommy's not rocking bandanas. What are we doing?
Right, exactly. Like we kind of like crossing it up now. Like
I legit thought,
badass.
I legit thought the nigga was coming back with like the purple gloves. Like I thought we was about to
cook. Yeah, old school.
Old school. Like, I was like, this nigga's still the American badass. Like
right.
Real quick, do you think the going back to the Dead Man at that time, do you think that saved the latter part of his career?
I think it did.
Okay.
It did a great service to it, and it did a great service to his brand and that character, who is like the supernatural, larger than life, like god of like the yard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of pro wrestling. Like I think it did him great service later on for his pocket, especially. You know what I mean?
Without question. Without question.
Getting back into that bag was very key.
So let's paint this picture. It is July. The taping takes place on the Monday. This was when they used to do super shows. So this particular segment took place on a Monday night, right? First week of July. I think it was the 4th, July 4th. Yeah, July 4th. They've now setting up Muhammad Hassan, The Undertaker, Great American Bash, #1 contenders match. The winner goes on to face the winner of JBL Batista in SummerSlam in Washington, D.C., which Batista won. So, Batista's going on to D.C., his hometown, the World Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah. It was written well as well. It was cool.
Very well. Very well.
They did it the right way for my boy.
The plan at this time is that Muhammad Hassan is going to beat The Undertaker at the Great American Bash and then go on to face Batista in what I believe was going to be a patriotic themed SummerSlam, because it's in the nation's capital. But it's going to be for the World Heavyweight Champion, which in as far as a what if, dog, that main event probably would have been fucking crazy.
Hell yeah, man.
From an atmosphere standpoint,
right? Just period.
Yeah. So Muhammad Hassan is backstage with Teddy Long. He's complaining and everything, and then Daivari pops off, and then Teddy Long books Sean Daivari or Cosmo Daivari, excuse me, in this gimmick against The Undertaker.
Yeah.
And as any manager would be, like, he's scared of going against The Undertaker. I always used to wonder about that. Like, when people would show fear of The Undertaker, I'm like, he's never killed anybody. You know what I mean? Like, you're not, like, you might be beat up, but, like, you good. Like, you're
right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And you might have been worried about getting one of the Maven receipts.
Yeah.
As long as they ain't violate.
Right.
Whatever. Yeah.
So then they go backstage. Daivari's looking nervous. And Muhammad Hassan then says that Daivari is going to be a sacrifice, but for the greater good. And also keep in this time, like, he's now referred to himself as the great Muhammad Hassan, right? Very, like,
deifying.
Yeah.
It's deifying. It's implying that he's, like, closer to God, or like, I mean, let's take it here, man. And I'm listen, the modern day Maharaja run,
fire.
But at that time, it was a little bit more problematic, since we was getting into the more stereotypical Islamic parts of this shit.
Without question. So the match happens. Taker destroys Daivari. Daivari tries to leave. Muhammad Hassan throws him back in. So now Muhammad Hassan has now positioned himself in front of the ring, closest to the entrance. Taker, chokeslam, tombstone, pile driver. You know what I mean? Little subtle thing about, like, Taker never taking his eyes off of Muhammad Hassan.
Right.
Beautiful storytelling. But then Muhammad Hassan, he extends his hands out and he drops to his knees.
Yeah.
And the whole imagery is surreal, because, like, there's smoke coming from, like, where the Titantron is, the stage. So when he drops down to his knees, he mouths, praise Allah. And then masked men start to hit the ring, right? And the masked men, they're dressed black ski mask, black sweater, black gloves, kind of fatigue type pants, the black boots. And man, they doing work. They stomping out. They do the boys are doing work. You know what I mean? One of them hits Taker with the club, but then we get to the point where one of them has a wire. He starts choking Taker, and Muhammad Hassan is like, he's going like this. He's like, choke him, but he's like going like that. Right?
Who directed this segment, man?
I don't know, bro. I don't know.
I think
They really did. They came in like Spider-Man. Yeah. Just popped up out of nowhere. Right. And so, like, Muhammad Hassan comes in, starts stomping him out, does the camel clutch. He leaves. Taping's done. We're done on a Monday. This is getting aired on a Thursday.
Yeah.
We've now set the tone for the match. Like, we in there. July 7th, 2005, 4 Islamic terrorists bombed 4 different locations in London, England. Right. This one hit that, you know what I mean? This one definitely hit very close to home. You know what I mean? Just being that it's like I had family in London too. That was definitely affected by this.
Word.
So I remember like that day I remember that day just as much as I remember 9/11 because I remember my mom being on the phone in tears, calling family members, and like this is during the day and age where like there's no FaceTime. You know what I mean? Like cell phones is still a brand new concept. So like getting in touch with people was a lot harder back then. So like a lot of panic in my household that particular day.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, you know, you just like with anything, you just go about your day, you know, praying that you hear from your loved ones, everything's good.
Mm-hmm.
SmackDown is to air this night. And like I said, keep in mind, this is a tape show. They don't air this SmackDown in the UK, right? But it still airs Thursday, the same day, July 7th. And they do a crawl that parental discretion is advised. And they air the segment, right? Now, there's 2 ways we can look at this, right? And I want to get your opinion on both. First, is there anything you want to say in general about that particular day?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, I was a kid and I had, I think maybe just like left like camp or something. Yeah, I mean, baseball camp. And, yeah, man, it was said that, you know, and at this time I'm really like, you know, kind of getting into like overseas news a little bit. Around this time was like the earliest stages of me getting to know a football club that I know and love, Chelsea.
How old were you?
I was 13. I was going on 13. July 26, 05, I turned 13. So okay. I was 12. And it's funny because the bash was 2 days before my birthday. But long story short, it was just terrible. You know what I mean? And it was kind of like reliving like 9/11 again. You know, I mean, not for nothing. You know, I kind of had a speaking engagement today in which I talked about 9/11, like from my vantage point, as a Catholic school student in the 4th grade. And kind of talking to some young people about that and like how 9/11, like how that day was for us students at that time, right? So it's interesting, kind of, you know, everything matters, and we always having these conversations for a reason. However, I just was like, this is like really terrible. You know what I mean? And you get that guts feeling again, like terrorism is starting back up again in America. And I mean, even going back to like 9/11, like, I mean, it's, you know, whatever, right? Like I grew up in high rise buildings, right?
Yeah.
But as an 8-9-year-old, you don't know what's possible. You don't know what's next. You know what I mean? So that was like an imminent fear, you know what I mean? Kind of coming out of that. But thinking about 05, you know what I mean? Like, you know, people take the train here in Philly too. People take the train. You're like, we didn't know if like this was going to be like, if this was like the new era of like terrorist attacks, you know what I mean? Coordinated attacks as we seen on September 11th. You know what I mean?
Right. I was 15, remembering like seeing the segment, you know what I mean? Everything.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I was like, this don't seem right.
It was dark. It was dark.
Yeah, I was like, which, you know what I mean? Like, being a wrestling fan, like, you kind of develop a, like, if you see something dark on, like, WWE at that time, you just chalk it up to what it is, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? Especially as a young teenager, like, there's really not much you could say. You know what I mean? You hop on the forums, let out, you know what I mean? Like, you know, before X, people were hopping on different wrestling forums and everything. But like, even at the time, you just like, this don't seem right. It was one of the very few times I was just confused about. I was like, why did they show this, right? And so like, I hop on the message boards and like, you know what I mean? Like, I remember the outrage towards it, right? More so of the like the insensitivity of them doing it, especially with it being a tape show.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, years later, they did a Muhammad Hassan episode on Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Pritchard.
Mm.
And he talked about this. Like they asked, like Conrad Thompson's asking him, like y'all had time to remove this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Bruce's argument is like, we didn't have time. It's, you know, XYZ. And like, I just remember thinking, I was like, that's bullshit. Like you absolutely had time. Like there's something you could have filled that segment with.
Yeah, they had.
If anything, you cut the segment off at the like before he hit, like he does the extends his arms out and hits the ground. The last thing you could have seen is Taker looking at Hassan looking at him, and then you could have just cut it.
Right, they could have edited that. Right.
Absolutely. And so, like in hindsight, we're looking at like from two perspectives because now the character's in hot water. Like I said, this is on UPN. UPN does not want nothing to do with this character.
Yeah.
Right.
It's supposed to be family programming.
Yeah. I don't know if the same result happens on Spike. Like if this had like aired that Monday, I don't think the controversy would have been it would have been heavy, but I don't think it would have been that bad.
No, it wouldn't have been this bad.
Yeah.
Being that, and that's the thing too, a lot of the times, you know, on, you know, broadcast networks, you know, they have more strict guidelines around their footage and how it gets distributed and when it gets distributed and like who has access to that. You know, sometimes I might notice watching another news station or watching like a late night show on a particular news station, they might show a particular event and it says like courtesy of NBC, but you're watching Kimmel on ABC. Shit like that. You know what I mean? Like NBC had to hand that over because of the way in which they're all federally regulated, right? These you know, big five networks versus like the premium networks who kind of have an easier time on their side of the television. It would have been some talk, but it wouldn't have been as of a heavily levied situation.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
So then, like I said, like the newspapers start labeling like that it was a terrorist wrestling, right? That's exactly what was in the New York Post, like
absolutely,
terrorist wrestling. So now the like UPN is not wanting them, right?
No,
but you still have this match. Like they're still promoting the match, right? But they don't know what to do now. Like, you know what I mean? And it seemed like when you hear from Mark Capani's perspective, you hear from other people's perspective, WWE didn't think it was going to be this bad. And that's why I originally asked you about the maturity level of this particular storyline. Because if this is happening hours after people have lost their lives in a terrorist attack, why would you not think that the blowback to this was not going to be anything but the gimmick being abruptly ended?
Hubris, corporate hubris. A lot of times you think you're above certain things. A lot of times you think that like because you are the boss of something that like again, like y'all are being distributed and displayed on like other people's networks. And I think that based on the business that one Vince McMahon has done with networks over the years, USA, Spike TV, UPN, largely the WWE is probably the most important program on their station. And so you're kind of you're kind of at like sometimes the network is at the behest of you, and that was the case heavily for the majority of Vince McMahon's time as the number one in that company, right? But at a certain point, you know what I mean, you're gonna have the answer to them people.
Absolutely. And then, like I said, if enough people complain, enough people
y'all catch my drift. Yeah. On all sides of the federal coin. Yeah, I mean, like
absolutely.
Communications, crime, civics, like, yeah, Vince, they coming.
So, from the television standpoint, they do the Muhammad Hassan's lawyer comes out and he said, due to like the political threat, like Muhammad Hassan will not appear on television until the Great American Bash. Wonderfully played by Tommaso Ciampa, by the way, when they had hair.
Yeah, real shit. Yeah.
That was young Tommaso.
Right.
But there was an unaired segment that Muhammad Hassan and Davari did. I think it was only broadcast on WWE.com.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes out, and I sent it to you earlier.
Yeah.
Just in case you had never seen it, or like I said, it's been a while since you have seen it.
Mm-hmm.
But he essentially, once again, we go back to the original premise of the gimmick.
Yeah.
Where where he's calling out the hypocrisy, right? And the journalist that originally wrote the terrorist thing, what was it, Don Kaplan?
Yeah, Don Kaplan, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
New York Times, yep. Conservative paper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially at that time, coming out of 9/11. You damn right.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what I mean? He pretty much is like, you asked Davari, have you met this Don Kaplan? Have you shook his hand? Have you had dinner with him?
Yeah.
It's like, I haven't either. So how does he know we're terrorists?
Yeah.
And the next line was something that's always stuck with me, especially when it comes to this particular storyline from the SmackDown.
Mm-hmm.
Of the 5 masked men, right? Now, you know what I mean? Like, in the early 2000s, there was a culture where those like videos of beheadings were prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, that was a real thing. And even like down to like that particular storyline, like them carrying out Davari like a martyr, you know what I mean? Like the sacrifice for the greater good, right? You're playing with a lot of like you're playing with a lot of fire.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But in this unaired segment, he, I think in the paper they labeled the 5 masked men as Arab.
Yes.
And when I think one of the most like brilliant twists to the whole thing was Muhammad Hassan saying, like, if they were wearing masks, and they're describing it in the paper, if they're wearing masks, how can you tell if they're Arab?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Definitely.
Which I like I said, that always stuck with me.
Yeah,
you know exactly what this story is doing, but you're labeling masked men that's covered from head to toe unrightfully as Middle Eastern Muslim men, right? Which, and like I said, in theory, it's funny because like these are white men under these masks,
right?
You feel what I'm saying? Like,
and then it's funny too because they ended up being labeled as sympathizers.
Yeah,
just real interest. Yeah, man. And I hate that it had to be exactly 5 because of again like a recent video that had came out in which an American journalist was unalived with 5 masked people behind him. Again, man, Don Kaplan is writing this piece for the New York Times, but it comes off as if it's a piece in the New York Post. For those of you all that's not really familiar with like national papers, New York, is on this side of the country. It's, it's this news capital of our country, at least on this side of the world. New York Times again is very conservative, very like like hoity-toity, right? But like the New York Post is very like tabloidy, right? It's very like some of this stuff might not be like trackable, right? Or some of the stuff sounds kind of outlandish. You know what I mean? So if you ever look at like the New York Post and we ever look at like the covers, they always have like these really like clever headlines. They're always trying to make folks laugh. They're trying to be really funny and sometimes like midline offensive, right? Depending on the time we talk about, again, very, very tabloid type paper. But it came off like it was a Post article instead of a Times article.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's very outlandish.
And like I said, like from a television standpoint, this is the last time, besides the Great American Match, that we see Muhammad Hassan, right? He does the match. And I remember at the time they were talking about like him still winning, them just like leaning into it. Like, I think the plan was like for him to go back to Raw or whatever, but he has the match. The 5 sympathizers are carrying him out. And he has the match with Taker, man. And they said that it was a squash match. Like he had offense in that match. Like,
he got some shit in. He got some shit in. You know what I mean? It was somewhat of a home game too.
Yes, because Buffalo or something like that.
Yeah, it was the Buffalo. Huh?
Yeah. And so, like he loses. Taker beats up the masked man.
Right.
He throws Davari against the announce table. That shit was crazy.
Yeah, that shit was crazy.
He threw Davari head first.
Yeah, a little bit of a receipt there for whatever reason. Yo, so let's do this, right? I really feel like they really ended up airing the segment with the masked men, with the sympathizers, because they were trying to keep it to wrestling, but it wasn't wrestling anymore. This is world, this is global, this is geopolitical. Undertaker historically has had the Druids. The Druids were mentioned a few minutes ago, but I feel like they're trying to equate Muhammad with Taker in a way where like he has his gang too, but they're also capable of brutality and destruction. Again, trying to keep it wrestling, trying to keep it within that world, but these themes, because we want themes, we want good synopsis, we want all of these good stories, right? We want good development, but like sometimes these themes in our society, in our country, take on a whole life of their own.
Yeah.
You dig what I'm saying? No matter how much we want to like put a Muslim American wrestler on, or whatever the case, or you know, the character of Muhammad Hassan, right? Through this man who had a particular look, as someone you know, from you know, that has Mediterranean lineage in his family. All of those, you know, people look very dark, Portuguese folks, Italian folks. I mean, you know, the list goes on, right? And as we get like more, as we get more southern in Italy, right, the folks get more dark, right? But however, you know, it's something to be said about like, you know, how we position people in wrestling, and like, especially when they have certain like upcoming opponents. And I really feel like they were just trying to drive that home a bit too much.
Yeah.
And you think about like the darkness of like other segments, right? Like I think about certain segments featuring like the Brood and Gangrel. You know what I mean? I think about the Ministry of Darkness segment with Steph, right? And Steph is, it's funny, somewhat responsible for some of this booking on the back end when it comes to Hassan. But again, that segment with, you know what I mean, with the and he's not being choked with a rope. He's not being choked with anybody, you know, bare hands. Like this is like an actual like instrument, right? That these guys like be using, that they have on them like tactically. Like these types of guys that roll like this. So they were doing a whole lot that equaled a whole lot darker than a lot of that Ministry of Darkness stuff that they was doing like in those segments that was pro Taker, right? But now you have Undertaker like, you know, like at the behest of this guy and like his like terrorist like homeboys. Like they was playing with a little bit too much fire, man.
And it's crazy because like there's so many ways they could have flipped this particular story. Like this could have been like if I was doing the book, you don't have to go the route of the five guys attacking Taker, right?
Yeah.
Because if the plan is for him to win, there's no harm in him showing legit fear to the main wrestler that projects onto other people, right? Yeah. So those, like, we talking about a 2-week gap. There was this segment, there was the following SmackDown, and then there was a pay-per-view.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? They could have easily just spent that time where like Taker destroys Davari, and then you show the fear of Muhammad Hassan, like he doesn't want to get in the ring with Taker, he doesn't want to do this.
Yeah.
And then you have Davari somehow interfere in the match. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. Right. Get him involved, right? Take a couple bumps.
Yeah, like,
yeah.
But then, like, even in hindsight, like, it makes me wonder if they were going to go this route, what the fuck were they going to do going into DC?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if they had went with Muhammad Hassan and Batista and it's in the nation's capital, like, what were they going to do in the lead up to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, right. What's
your
conversation like? Yeah.
And so, like, that going back to the question of like their maturity towards political dialogue and conversations, like, and I'm directly looking at that regime of that time. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, nothing WWE was doing was hitting in the sense of like you're having fans turn away.
Mm-hmm.
We're not even talking about the Muhammad Hassan thing. Fans just are not interested in the product, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just a lot of L's across the board, but then you have this, right? The fact it's funny is like the fact that WWE is still a major entity in entertainment, especially where they're positioned today. Mm-hmm. Think about just the 2 years of this, right? Mm-hmm. Starting with like you have political backlash for the Muhammad Hassan character. What, 5-6 months later, one of your biggest performers dies. and Eddie Guerrero, right? Then you have like this creative downslide in 06, right? Then another one of your major stars a year later murders unalives his family, excuse me. Just like, you know what I mean? The fact that they made it past that is very.
And don't forget the Vince is dead angle right before Benoit.
Before it, you know what I mean?
Like these are some of this is some of the most like the times in this company like in the early aughts, man. To them, oh my gosh.
And the reason why I treat this as like my biggest what if is because WWE never held itself accountable for this, right?
No.
Somebody had to take the bullet, and it just happened to be Mark Capani, right? Which all he did was just did what he was told. You know what I mean?
He did his job.
He did his job.
And they fired him for it. Maven Huffman. I thought it was a very profound quote of the whole episode. And I think that's a very that drives home for many people in this industry. You do your job and they send you home for it.
Yeah. You know what, like I don't think it was in the interview, but he did a interview with John Pollock, you know, shout out to Post Wrestling. But he was like, oh no, excuse me. John Pollock and Wei Ting were talking about it.
Okay.
And they brought up just 6 months later, like he gets fired in September, but just a few months later, Daivari comes back on the television as Kurt Angle's manager. But nothing changed about Daivari.
No.
Like Daivari was still speaking Farsi. He was still the Cosbro Daivari gimmick.
Yeah.
Right. So like in salute to Sean Daivari, because Sean Daivari is an agent in WWE right now, which I think is a beautiful.
Still got a job, right?
Yeah. But then, like you think about what happened to Mark Capani after this.
Yeah,
it just felt like him going from. I'm very curious to see if TNA did have interest in him. I would imagine they would have. Right?
Yeah. I think he worked a couple of shows after. I don't know what these shows were, but I think he worked a couple of indie shows like after his firing, and then that was it. Probably about like a good 3. He might have been like in the title match on the indies, and then I think he might have gave the title up.
Okay. But what do you like from like the end of the gimmick, man? What's your perspective? You know what I mean? Before we wrap everything up.
Man. I think that this was one of the most if you I don't know about this Muhammad Hassan stuff, like I think it's a really good time to do that homework because we're in such like an interesting time, just like globally and just in general. But you know, we've had the pleasure of having like another like thematic situation with a recent WWE champion who was said to be from India, and you know we got some things there. I think Mustafa had a pretty interesting time. I'm trying to figure certain things out, and Mustafa I think has definitely hit a stride in his career and is really enjoying his wrestling. But at the end of this run, I think that Muhammad Hassan walked so a lot of these guys could run, right? He laid down a lot, and granted, again, he's not a man that is from the backgrounds of, you know, the people that I mentioned, right? We've seen people come up in the last couple of months, come up and come back down like Mansoor, right? And come back up, right? And do certain things. And I'm thinking of the other guy too. I can't think of my man's name right now, but you know, all of the stuff we got going on with the Saudi Arabian government, I often think about, man, you know what I mean? Like, what if, how do they respond to a guy like him? How long could this gimmick have been like kept a thing? I mean, granted, if we get a Muhammad Hassan into the internet age, that homework eventually does start being done, especially with how the IWC is and everything like that these days. But again, man, I think that he did one of the most interesting things that any pro wrestler ever did, right? And that's like you take on this like polarizing character that like probably folks who are actually Arab probably like wouldn't play, right? Or like, you know what I mean? I'm not sure, right? But yeah, I think that he's definitely like I hate to use like terms like sacrificial or I don't know, but I will say this: it is kind of dope. It is kind of dope that the guy who's actually of Arab descent got to keep his job.
Yeah.
It's something about that that's I'm not no, the WWE is not a perfect company. Like we all know that. But for everything that I think that they had like been through, or it's very fucked up that Mark had to take that. But when you're the guy portraying that character, and then just based on how all of this shit is structured, television and all of these things, man, it's just like, damn, like, okay. But I do find a little bit of silver lining in the fact that Arya is still there and was, able to do some more work. And I think that somebody like Mark is happy about that too. You know what I mean? But yeah, again, man, like it's just messed up how you do your job and you get fired for it. And he had a very specific job to do, right? I think that it was the way that the stars just lined up for him was just like, God damn, you know what I mean? But they did a little bit too much with the character. They definitely didn't do him no service by the end of the run with including some of those things. I think they probably should have listened to him a bit more. But I will say this: it must be cool to have a school principal that worked WrestleMania. Shout out to those kids that's able to say that, because without that man going into education and getting his masters and all of that, there would be no kids. And I don't know if there's any kids that say that. I don't know if any kids in his district watch wrestling. I'm sure some do. But if I had a principal that worked WrestleMania, I knew that I probably could shoot for the stars too.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool where certain people end up where they end up.
And I think the one thing about this gimmick is if he did a terrible job, I don't think we'd be talking about it. I think we would be focusing a lot on, like I said, that one particular taping and everything. But I think the reason why like the conversation comes up about him is because him and Daivari both did the job brilliantly. Yeah. Right? You know what I mean? Like, we talking about, like we've said, an excellent talker, solid in the ring. Like, I definitely foresaw like world championship runs in his future. But like, you know what I mean, the way that the universe works, you know what I mean, things happen for a reason.
They probably should have slowed it down just a little bit.
Just take your foot off the gas.
Because I think that his let's say they would have put him in an Intercontinental title picture, right? Him being somewhat of him linking up with the Intercontinental title picture would have been fire,
dog.
And him probably ending up with that title.
The U.S. title would have been
the U.S. There we go. Let's get more specific. Let's get more specific. You're absolutely right.
Like, the U.S. title would have been money, but once shit, man. Like, I wish that like New Japan wasn't trash in 05. They would have scooped him up, yo. Like, come on through.
Yeah, man. Because he had the talent. He definitely had it.
Yeah,
he could go like a motherfucker, man. And
but like I said, like in how they described it at the end of Dark Side of the Ring, like, it's a happy story if you really think about it. Like, like I said, both him and Daivari are in positions. It's good to know that they still talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know. That warmed my heart. I was like, that's what's up.
Real, man. You don't get to hear too much of that. You get to hear about it but it's I'm really, guys that have split or one guy gets fired and like, so that was real good to hear.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So yeah, that's the story of Muhammad Hassan as told by BGW.
Absolutely. I think it's very important that we focused on this. I think that this was a great season finale. Shout out to Evan Huntley and all of those Dark Side folks.
Absolutely.
We need a bit more. I need my 2 Code episode. And again, granted, to my guys' discretion, because these, but yeah, I think it was a great season finale. And I remember getting excited first seeing that this was going to be on the because this like Muhammad Hassan, like, this is one of my stories. Like, this is this is when I was alive, kicking and well. You dig what I'm saying? Like, on the cusp of being a teenager. Because first watching Dark Side of the Ring, season 1, episode 1, Match Made in Heaven. You always hear about the mega powers and things like that, and but it was kind of cool seeing it presented in the way that they do things on Vice, on Crave in Canada. But to be getting some of these newer ones, like the new Jack, that I'm kind of a bit closer to it, but like kind of like these early 2000s. So I'm glad we did this.
I'm hoping next season they do the Arn Anderson Sid Vicious joint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'd be tapped in. But like I said, excellent season. You know what I mean? Phenomenal season finale. Like I said, the reason why I wanted to do a watch list on this is just because, like I said, there's always been something I've wanted to talk about because the character, the person, the whole aesthetic of it, very fascinating. So
Yeah.
I think we did my man service, bro. I think we did
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully, man, I don't know, this might get the mark. Who knows? I mean,
shit. I 100% anticipate that this is gonna get taken down.
Yeah, hey man, that vignette. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah.
Let's listen in. Yeah, I mean, but I think he recently did he get a Chris Van Vliet interview in not so long ago too?
He did.
Okay, yeah. I still got to check that out. I haven't seen that, but
shoot, if we can get Mark Capani on the locker room lead, bro.
Hey man, I listen. You know, I don't think I got no agents or no people to be, on the inquiry while I'm trying to make it. Hey man, let's listen in. Season 2 is coming up, and I mean, it is a reason to talk to him now. So let's listen in. Get out there, bro. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. Well, look, this has been a phenomenal episode.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Got great things happening. You know what I mean? We'll be back tomorrow.
Yep.
I think.
Mm-hmm.
Or for what, 203?
202 or 203?
Shit, I've already lost count.
I think we 202, right? Because I think it might be 202.
Is it 2? Okay,
yeah,
that's cool.
I think it might be 202. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? We'll have the gang all tapped in. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We got Money in the Bank, Worlds Collide. You know, we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
But yes, you can find me, Poetic Scotland, on X, Scotland_Underwood on Instagram. You know what I mean? Go follow the articles, Dar Sports Media.
Mm-hmm.
Go buy the books. Your Love is Necessary, Brother to the Night, Volume 1, Volume 2.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Yeah, we cooking this summer. So yeah, tap in.
Absolutely, man. Y'all know where to find me at. Low from the Lead, Locker Room Lead, BGW Potters for Life. Go follow our other brothers.
Yes.
And yeah, man, it's time that we like we said, we kind of celebrated a bit episode 2000, but we right back in the thick of things, y'all. So thanks for rocking with us, man. This is
we are working. You know what I mean? But yeah, we gonna be tapped in tomorrow. Hope y'all join us then. Thank you for tapping in with us this Saturday night. Mm-hmm. But yeah, until next time, my brother, you got anything else?
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine all fucking day, bro. You know what I mean? We are out.
Peace and love, family.
Peace.